How can we build communities around the impact we want to make in the world? How do we get people engaged and excited to support our missions when everyone is so busy already? How do we get others to care? This season will bring you people that decide to look closer. They look where others have turned away. They are building their very own communities to make a positive impact. I am Regina Larco, and this is #Impact. What you are about to hear will encourage you to leverage your own story, experiences, and talents to drive the impact you want to make in the world. You will meet a very special woman, a woman I've looked up to for many years, and I'm so glad that we finally got to have this conversation. Amel Derragui is a marketing coach, community builder, speaker, and podcast host at The Time Is Now. Originally from Algeria, born in India, and raised across 3 continents. She is a global citizen and has been active in the world of social entrepreneurship since the age of 14. Through her services and platforms, she helps experts, changemakers, and community builders turn their vision into an effective plan and a marketing strategy that allows them to grow their visibility and level of impact. She speaks on international stages and works with global organizations such as IMF and the World Food Programme on topics related to entrepreneurship and women empowerment. Ranking among the, and oh my goodness, top 2% podcasts globally, the Time Is Now podcast show has also been charted at number 1 in the expat category every year since 2019. And you can find Amel's work featured on various media such as Forbes magazine, Global Living magazine USA, and Weekly Woman South Korea. And now on #Impact. Amel, what a beautiful ride you are on, really. I've listed a bunch of achievements now, but what would you say, what was your proudest moment so far?
Oh my God. I don't think it's one moment. I know that it's not pleasant to have that as an answer, but for me, it's more the journey to getting to where I am and looking forward to the journey to where I will be. I think the biggest thing is sticking through the ups and downs and even through the highs and the lows and learning and growing. And the biggest thing that I always tell my clients and my community is how much actually entrepreneurship has not only helped me grow professionally, but it actually, most importantly, helped me grow as a person. So when I look back at your question and my journey, for me, it's really about the path more than a specific moment somehow, because there were many, many highlights, many moments, but there were also many hard times. But the biggest takeaway for me is how all of this has helped me grow as a person.
Mm-hmm. That I was curious, like that first entrepreneurial adventure you were on when you were 14. What was that?
It's a long story, but I'm going to try and make it short. But that's when I fell in love with marketing and entrepreneurship, was when I was 14 years old. I had just, so I come from Algeria, and the only years I lived in Algeria were during really hard times where the terrorists were killing people every day. So as a kid, I've seen things that no kid should be seeing. And then we moved to Yugoslavia. At the time, it was Yugoslavia during the war, and then we moved to Uganda, where it was in the middle of the genocide between Hutu and Tutsis. So I arrived in Uganda in this French school. There were a lot of refugees from both ethnies and a lot of white people, black people, all kinds of nationalities and genders and races and cultures, which is beautiful, right? Like to be all in this amazing space together. Finally, a place where we could all come together. And I was really excited about this until I was new in the school, until I started paying attention to what was happening in the school breaks. And I would hear those conversations that these kids are having that were shocking. Like people insulting each other for their races, where they come from, and fights over ethnies. And I was told, for instance, I was nothing because I was not black, I was not white. I was told I could not be African because I'm not black. And I heard lots of other things that what people would say to the other. It was just insane. I was just shocked. It's like, how can that happen in the middle of a school? So I went to the principal and I went to complain. I said, hello, I mean, do something about this. And her answer was, well, if you care, then you do something about it. I was so shocked. I first was like wordless. And then I looked at her and I thought about it. And then I said, you know what? Actually, I will come back to you with something. So I had thought about this all night and I was like really obsessed with this thing. It's like, okay, if we had to fix this, how do we fix it? How do we bring people together? Speaking of community, like, how do we feel like we're part of something common together? And I think I was a bit cynical at first. I was like, what is the first thing that brings people together? And my first answer was like, money. When there's money involved, people are ready to make sacrifices. So, okay, good. Where else? And it's like, okay, second thing is food. Like, food brings people together. You know, food for me is a symbol when people sit around a table and we actually come together when we eat together. And the third one was fun. If something is fun and brings joy, it brings people together. Like, okay, so these are the things that could be something that bring us together. But how do you put this into place, right? And I was thinking, we have a big problem in the school is that talking about food, we didn't have a canteen. Parents were complaining all the time that they had to come to either give sandwiches and unhealthy food to the kids or had to come back and forth all the time for lunch breaks. So I'm like, what if we solve this problem with the food by having the students create their own little canteen who they are responsible for creating it and running it. And that could be a project that creates money, creates food, and hopefully brings fun as well. And that's how I came to my principal and said, okay, I have this idea. And she said, well, actually, this is a great idea. And I surrounded myself with a wonderful mentor, my math teacher. She was amazing. She was the only teacher ever that made me believe in myself. And she was so supportive in this project. And we built a team together. Some classmates joined me in this. And it was a beautiful, beautiful project that led to first phase, which was fundraising through parties, talking about food and fun. But one of the rules of these parties to fundraise the funds we needed was to never, ever use catering for the food. We had to do the food that we were planning to sell, right? So for me, the most beautiful moment and winning moment of this journey was when all the kids were sitting in a table and we did a food chain to make the sandwiches for the party. Well, one person would butter the bread, the other one put the tomato, the salad, the cheese, the last one would pack it. And all these kids that were fighting were suddenly around the table and actually doing that together. So this was amazing moment. And to link it to my journey on top of the impact I think it made for me personally, but also seeing these people suddenly get along and learn to know each other and appreciate each other differently, was to see how actually I got the funding and the sponsorship of Coca-Cola for this project, of ABB, which are two big international companies, plus the biggest DJ of the city has actually supported this project. And that is when I realized how marketing and knowing how to sell ideas can actually make the world a better place. It's beyond just business. It's knowing how to message, knowing how to position yourself, knowing how to sell your ideas to make a difference. And so I try to make it short, but that's the answer of what was behind it. But that set me off to, from that moment, know exactly what I wanted to do next.
Yeah. Amel, this is almost, well, everything you just shared, that would open up another episode I would have so many questions now about how you were growing up and all that. And I really encourage our listeners to also reach out to you directly if they want to hear that story. I know I will definitely do. Then
With
off
pleasure.
the record, when we're going to go meet for coffee sometime as well here in Vienna, because that's where you're based right now. And so am I. I'm so glad that we're in the same city. But I mean, funny side note, and that just blew my mind. You know that I was also running a canteen at my school.
Oh, I did not know that.
As a social impact project.
Oh my
God.
That's a fun coincidence.
It was a different background, and I'm not going to get into it now, but what? Oh my goodness. I always knew there was this connection from the first moment I met you. And it goes back to, I mean, it's so funny. Anyways, I read this beautiful and very honest article that you wrote when you reflected on your 7 years being in business that you published earlier this year. It was at the end of last year. So congratulations.
Year,
I mean, first of all,
this year is going to be 8 years. Thank you.
Amazing. And I could read many beautiful learnings in that article. I actually would love to link it in the show notes as well for everyone to read the full article. It's beautiful. One of the things you wrote there was what I have always aimed to achieve and are at the core of who I am. First, how to make a bigger impact in the world. Second, how to help people live up to their full potential and create a ripple effect. And looking at just like, maybe let's look at the first point here now, how to make a bigger impact on the world. I actually would love for you to tell us how we can actually get people engaged and excited to make a bigger impact in the world, support good causes, start their own initiatives, when we are all so busy and tied up in all our commitments and responsibilities already. What do you think?
We always think, when you think about impact, this huge thing, that we have to do and commit to. When I think that it always starts with one small baby step. So ultimately is, what is the simplest thing I can do right now that is in my power without burning myself, right? So ultimately that's what it comes down to. Its impact starts with one small little act that actually, it can be very small, but it can have a ripple effect. It can create a ripple effect. So no matter what we try to do in the world, even if we have a big vision, it has to start with something simple and small. And asking ourselves this question is the best way to start without waiting until the perfect time comes, because we know that never comes.
I love that. And that's kind of what you did as well, right? With your own business. You just took that first step and
I took the mic. I started with a podcast, and that's it.
Started with the podcast, right?
Actually, maybe I can tell you a little bit about that if you want, because I think that can help about impact, talking about impact, because I had another business, which was consulting for corporate companies. And my specialty was how to use a marketing budget to not only get visibility, but also make an impact in the community. So that was always my thing. Even when I was an employee, I used to push my bosses to work towards that. Like, let's try to find an angle where we can actually serve at the same time as get visibility. So I loved it. However, to be honest with you, I was not completely thriving because it was something was missing and I didn't know yet what. But there was another issue, was that I have given up my career to live on the move for my husband's job, and I created my business while living on the move. I felt really lonely because I couldn't find any spouses like me who actually were so committed to their businesses. But I also was very touched and moved and bothered by the vulnerability of many women around the world who give up their careers, no matter if they're expats or not, to take care of their families, their loved ones, and put themselves in a very vulnerable position in terms of mental well-being, but also financial independence, while taking care of everybody. And that's when I was like, I had actually some cases of depression and suicide around me due to the fact of having to be the one who follows. And I was like, what can I do? What can I do about this? I cannot anymore just watch. I need to do something about this. And that is when I decided to start a podcast to talk about entrepreneurship as a solution to women's career challenges. And the fact that we don't have to have a big corporation to actually create our own source of fulfillment, but also revenue. And that's how it all started. So I started the podcast on the side of my other business, and a year down the road, it picked up and I started having more and more requests. Okay, how do we do that? That's when I started to think, okay, so I can turn this also as a business on top of the message behind it so that I can continue to do what I love and still make my own revenue and do something that's meaningful.
When we talk about our journey, I noticed that on myself as well. Like it all makes sense. Like when we are now looking back, because we started the podcast around the same time, right? And then I look back and I'm like, that totally made sense. It evolved a lot, but back then it made sense. And now when I talk about it to others, it often feels to them then, but that sounds like it was so easy for you to do that. But it actually, no, it wasn't. There were a lot of going back and forth. How did you overcome these things of like to actually take that step and move forward and make that little impact that you were just talking about? How did you kind of get over yourself?
Oh, that's a great question. It is not a smooth ride, but to be honest with you, when I kicked off this project, I was so determined, but at the same time mindful of the little time I had to make it happen. So again, just starting by saying, where can I get started? That is like, what is the simplest thing I can do for me was to learn how to podcast. So I just focus on that, getting to learn how to podcast. At the time, there was no podcast. I mean, it was very new, right? I remember I was telling people I'm a podcast and I'm like, you're a pod what? Like podcasting was not even a thing in Europe, right? I remember it was picking up in the US, but more as a listener side, more than producer side. But that was the first step. And then one step after the other, right? But one of the key factor, I think, is clarity on the vision. Like having that clarity was key to me finding the resources I need to get things done. And the second is commitment. Clarity and commitment for me, I was committed to the point where I knew what needed to go from my day-to-day life for me to focus on this. I had to communicate with my husband, say, this is one of the things I used to do is to help him with some of his events in our home and work. And I was like, I can't do that anymore. You're going to have to find somebody else. And he was like, of course. And I always thought that I had to do it. But then when I realized that, he was like, sure, no problem. I have trainees. I have an assistant. She can do that. I'm like, all these years I put my pressure into doing that when I could have just asked for help and say, hey, this is not anymore possible. I have to get this out of my plate so I can focus on what matters. So commitment and then ultimately asking for help and building our support system, I think, is key to becoming a change maker. We don't make change. We don't make impact if we think that we're just going to do it in our little corner, trying to push through all the obstacles.
I am Regina Larco, and this is #Impact. Today, in conversation with Amel Derragui, we learn how to build a community from scratch with purpose and intention, and why letting go of the notion of working hard is something we could all aspire to do. And you mentioned food before and bringing people together in circles. I mean, that's just something so beautiful you're doing right now in Vienna to bring women together that have these, that are global citizens that happen to find themselves now in Vienna. Mm-hmm. And I've been lucky to experience a community growing here in Vienna where you just in small, intimate circles, very informal, you're bringing these women together, and there have been so many beautiful collaborations that happened just because you made this initiative to bring women together. I just wanted to say that. Like, I'm
I'm
so
so
inspired
happy.
by you.
Thank you. I don't feel like, the thing is that if we want to build a community, it cannot happen just because of the doing on one person. And that's important. There's a book actually that I can recommend that's called Tribe by Seth Godin. And it's really important to understand that. So I appreciate that you say that, but also know that it's a wonderful experience, the Cosmo tables, because of the members. Like I always told in every table that you get out what you put in. And at the end of the day, every person is responsible for this community to be fruitful and to be powerful and to be supportive for each other. So as much as I might have initiated it, I'm very grateful for each of you, including you, who brought your energy to this table and brought that atmosphere that's necessary for such a thing to happen.
So just to clarify for everyone who is not part of the Cosmo tables, so this is like a monthly gathering where it's self-organized, and you how it appears to me. Yeah? And then you give me if I have got that right. You met a bunch of women in Vienna and you put them together in a WhatsApp group. Now there are several of those, like small WhatsApp groups, and you say, we should have a dinner once a month. And then we're going to organize. Everyone is responsible for organizing this dinner once, coming together, sharing a meal together. And the first time I just went there, I was like, okay, it's going to be a bunch of strangers. I don't know what to expect, but Amel invited me, so I'm just gonna check it out. And the thing is, I went once, but I kept coming. And I see that with everyone, right? And that takes commitment as well, because we're all so busy, right?
Yeah. Everybody's so busy, and not everybody can come every time, but I think the commitment to wanting to be part of it is what makes it work somehow. So, and it all started by dinner, actually. I don't ask people to be part of a WhatsApp group if actually they don't want to. They need to expressively want it, because I feel like from the moment we give our number, it's already a commitment. And so I always first invite the people to the first dinner. And if they pick up the vibe and they want to continue, then they join the WhatsApp group.
Right. Thanks for clarifying that.
Because true. I think people need to say yes. If they don't say yes to it, there's no point. And there are times where people said no, and actually it's great. I would rather people say no, this is not for me, than say yes and then just not show up and just be this number that's to ghost somebody who's there who doesn't really show up. So commitment is another word, again, that I'm repeating that goes very well with community. I think it comes from the person who initiates it, but also from every member. A community doesn't work if people are not engaged in the common vision together.
I want to bring up another term that is relevant here, I think. And it is hard work. The biggest belief that I had to give up, and I'm quoting you now from that beautiful article, and I'm still working on it, you share there, to take my business to the next level is hard work. I learned from my father from a young age that hard work was a must. It's been one of my highest values and what has helped me grow in my journey so far. However, I realized this value is not serving me anymore. I've realized that my belief that I needed to work hard was having the opposite effect. It was making me make things hard when things could actually be easy.
It is a powerful shift that I experienced as well. And I worked on it, and it was a big shift for me. It was a very disturbing shift. Honestly, it's not easy to change such a deep belief and value, because we're all driven by our values in everything we do. And I encourage everybody who's listening, if you're not clear about what they are, you need to work on it, because without even knowing, your beliefs and your values are actually guiding every decision, consciously or subconsciously, that you're making. And hard work is never something that I thought I was consciously deciding to go through. But funny, I had an ant on my desk that I loved. I called it Freddie. And I realized that Freddie was the symbol of that value, hard work. And I had to put it in the back now because I still like Freddie, but he doesn't have to be here on the desk. He can be somewhere else, hanging, chilling. And I have an elephant now that represents, which is more maturity and spirituality for me. But I agree, hard work is important to detach from that value because it makes us make everything hard. However, one nuance I need to bring to that, a lot of people, when they start going into this field about, how we bring our energy to our work and the impact we want to make and the values we have, I don't think that success comes with that work, right? It has to come, but instead of talking about hard work, I would again talk about commitment. How committed are we to something and how are we showing up to make it happen? I do think we need to work. And for some people, it might seem as hard work, but when you love what you do and you are really driven, it's not hard work. From the moment it's hard work, it means it's not that you're not working hard. It simply means that you're choosing to put your focus and energy on the things that matter. And when you do that, it's not hard work anymore. Do you see the nuance?
But what to do then in moments when we do lose the energy? And I understand that was one of the hardest moments that you had to overcome in your own impact journey. And I just mentioned your dad, right?
Yeah, that was a huge, so my father passed away 2 years ago, and that was a big shift in my energy and the way I showed up. But it was an interesting, so the good thing is that now I think I can talk about it without crying. But I don't know where to start with this. But what was interesting, first of all, was that my father was sick for 7 years, and the 2 last years of his life, we knew that his time was counted. So that wasn't a blessing and at the same time a curse somehow to know, because it makes it harder. At the same time, I had a lot of energy actually through that because I knew that my time was counted. I have really reshaped completely my business, transformed it, and it actually grew while I decided to only work part-time. So I reduced my time for 50% and I managed to grow the business. So that again shows how you don't need to work hard to actually get the results. You need to be laser focused and be very clear and aligned to what you want to achieve, right? So I did have a lot of energy at that point because I was driven by having quality time with my father, to be able to travel, to see him, to go visit him, because we were in New York, he was in South Korea, and then he passed away between France and Switzerland. It was just a crazy story. We could make a movie about it, but anyhow, so the energy was there while he was sick and while I was battling the most hardest part of our lives as a family. But I think once all this hecticness stopped, that's when I think the body just shut off. I was like, I could not function anymore. But I knew this was going to happen, and I had planned it in a way that I actually started seeing a therapist before he passed away to prepare. So it was already helpful, and I planned at least 2 months to just recuperate, because it was very, very hectic to support him through his last weeks. And in a very complex global situation on top of it, and in the middle of COVID. So I did take 2 months to completely recover, but I was not able to completely go back to where I was somehow until I decided to get help and to actually figure out, okay, what is happening. And I'm glad I did, because a lot of things have shifted since. And I don't know if that's what you wanted to know, but I don't know which direction you want to take this. I'll let you guide this.
I think you said something very important here that is oftentimes hard to do. And it came up before when you said as well that, why didn't I ask for help? And now you actually did. Like you are okay to say, I'm not okay, and I want to be supported through this. And I think that's also a really important shift that I personally had to make as well. But in general, I think it's something very, very human, or maybe very, very characteristic for maybe our generation. And we share the same birth year. Yeah.
Yeah.
That we were often wired in a sense that we are supposed to work hard because we have the opportunities. Our parents are creating space for us where the world is kind of open for us. We are privileged to get an education, to do something with it, to impact the world. And we want to make these changes and want to build our communities, but to not forget at the same time that we are still humans and we are not some super heroes that can lift everything for our families, for our businesses, for our communities. That's actually, I think, one of the things that I've seen in all these conversations, on and off the record, since starting recording for #Impact, that this is something that still seems to be the hardest thing to do.
Definitely. Yeah. I think asking for help and investing in the help we need is so important. This is something that not enough people do, especially women, to feel that they're worth it, that they would actually invest the money of the household on themselves, that would never hesitate to invest in everything else that the family needs. But when it comes to them, that's another story. So I think that's the biggest shift that I try to do in my work as well, to get women to actually, self-worth is the key of what I learned through this journey of actually finding somehow purpose beyond just who I'm doing it for. It's also about me being able to actually love myself enough that I actually find myself worthy of investing in my growth, in my joy, in my fun. I went on a trip to Oslo and it took me years to actually just say, hey, I want to treat myself for a trip. Here we go. And this is something that even without kids, I hesitated to do. So I think that's really important. If we want to make an impact in the world, build a community, we need to surround ourselves with the right people, get help, but also at some point, trust in us enough and believe in us enough that we're worth the investment in what we need to grow.
Can I get that on a book, please? Oh my God, Amel, we got to write a book together. I'm going to put this on the record now. This were, yeah. Yeah, I mean, yes, and yes. And with that, actually, Amel, I want to encourage everyone to hear more of your story because you have so much to give. I would love to take you to the legendary #Impact quickfire round. Are you ready?
Let's do this.
Making an impact means
seeing a problem and figuring out a way to fix it.
You can't see me right now, but I'm making oh my God, Amel, it keeps getting better. Who inspires you in the way they are building communities?
Oh, that's also the reason I went to Oslo, Malala. I actually went and met her.
No way!
Yeah.
Oh,
So
my gosh.
Malala is for me a great person that I look up to. One of my mottos is turning challenges into opportunities to make a difference, and she just embodies that in every way.
And what could everyone do right now to make the world a better place?
Start with yourself before you try to help other people. Help yourself, and then one baby step at a time. You don't need to change the world overnight, and one little action can make a ripple effect. So you don't even realize how sometimes things that you think don't matter can actually make an impact.
Yeah. Let's all do that. Thank you so much, Amel, for being here. To be continued. Oh.
I love this conversation. Thank you for the amazing work you do and the passion you put into empowering people to make an impact. And I just love the energy you bring in everything you do. So thank you for that.
Go to thetimeisnow.biz to find Amel's podcast. I'll put it in the show notes for you as well. There's so much inspiration in there. And here's just a little taste of some of the episodes that I think you will love too. The one decision that led to global change, or the impact of the invisible workload on caregivers and gender equity, or how to heal your money wounds and transform your financial story. I'm a regular listener of Amel's podcast, and I can highly recommend to head over there and get your dose of inspiration as well. If you enjoy what I am doing here as I'm building the #Impact community, I invite you to become part of it. Head over to #impact.com/subscribe, and I will be sending a Changemaker motivation boost your way, and you will join our beautiful, beautiful community of changemakers that are, just like you, and just like Amel taught us today, taking these one little and simple first steps that can have beautiful ripple effects to make a positive impact in this world. Thank you for being here today. I talk to you soon. Bye.